Welcome to the UnLearn show. We got Kris Mack, and thank you for giving up an hour of your Saturday to be with us. We'd love for you to just do a little bit of a brief introduction. Tell us about who you are, what the audience should know about you, and then one of our co-hosts, probably Lacey, will cue us up and start us off with the first set of questions.
All right, so the first thing that I always get asked is how to pronounce my last name. So it's Macchiarola, but I go by Kris Mack or K Mack because it's just so much easier. And I worked in corporate America for close to 20 years. And prior to that, I was a school psychologist. And then I had this major transformation happen in my life. And I decided to leave corporate America and go out on my own. And it has been a journey of learning and unlearning, of successes and, things that have happened that maybe I would definitely do differently. And I've enjoyed the journey because for me, getting to the outcome is not the be all end all for me at this point in my life. So the journey is where it's at.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I know you posted at one point about saying that, there's kind of a lesson to be learned in everything. And you try and find that. And you talk a lot about this concept of emotional intelligence and really pushing that, which I think is brilliant. Is there one big lesson that you've learned kind of transforming your life that you can share that would really help people kind of lead them in the best way?
Yeah, so I think when I think back to like the last 3 years has really been such a pivotal journey for me in my life. I just turned 45 last month. And so 3 years ago, my father passed away, and it was very tragic and horrible. But there was gifts that came out of that. And for me, it was really the start of learning more about myself and peeling back those layers and not being afraid to find what was there. And so it's really about vulnerability, and that is in tandem with emotional intelligence and self-awareness, and really peeling back those layers and figuring out what makes you tick, what feeds your soul. What are those things that, you're just going to say no to? And you've been saying yes to them your whole life. And now is the time to start saying no and being confident in that and learning your voice and learning your value. And I think LinkedIn has played a part in this for me, probably like the last year and a half, where I remember just even commenting was terrifying. Writing a comment, hitting post was like, oh my gosh. And then writing an article and then putting out content daily and going to video, oh my gosh, was insanely terrifying. And so all of that has been a huge learning process. And I've just seen so much growth in myself, and it's super fun. And, really now learning to accept risk and challenge yourself. And so I use that not only for myself, but I do that with organizations. So at the end of the day, I don't care what kind of technology is being brought into the organization, because everything's all about artificial intelligence. At the end of the day, it's about human to human. And if we don't know ourselves and we don't understand our emotions, we don't know how to communicate with others, businesses are suffering. They are suffering. So I don't know if that answered your question at all, Lacey, but
yeah. Just get the conversation started, I think. Kind of learn more about how you tick.
Yeah, I'm still learning about what
Aren't we all?
Yeah. But it's good. I have a vision board. You all can't see it, but I keep it in my office. It's literally like 2 feet away from me. And that was a great exercise for bringing clarity at a very granular level of what are the things that I really want in my life? What are those things that are important, so that I can start intentionally creating opportunities that lead me towards that vision. So I think that's something else that, is very important to me as I go through this journey. And always want to be growing and learning or unlearning.
Okay, so Kris, I have a question because you're like very introspective. Obviously, you have a very, very high EQ, but like that mindset that you have is rare, right? And especially for people who haven't gone through something kind of traumatic or some deep experience. So like, what would you say would be the best advice to someone who hasn't experienced something that like profound and that earth shattering?
Yeah, I actually am getting ready to do a keynote on this at the end of July. And that's part of the speech is, not to wait until you have this life-changing traumatic experience that, every day is a gift. And why are you settling for the acceptable level of mediocrity? Because so many people they're just treading water. They're just, going with whatever, they're letting life happen to them instead of intentionally creating opportunities that feed their soul. And so, actually the talk is about how embracing vulnerability increases success at work. And it doesn't have to be like, I'm not saying that people need to go and quit their jobs and start their own business. That's not for everyone, but there are things that you can do today in your current role that are really talking about how you can embrace vulnerability. So for example, one might be negotiating a higher salary. That's vulnerable. That is putting yourself out there. That is knowing your worth and being assertive. Another one might be put your name in the hat for a promotion. Why are you sitting on the sidelines and letting everyone else do these things? These are things that you can start doing. Speaking up. There are a lot of people that are afraid to use their voice and speak up. They don't know their value. They question, who would want to hear what they have to say. Those are little ways that you can start. And so challenging yourself to get out of your comfort zone. So even if it's a micro step, the more you do that, the more comfortable you become with change and with challenges. So that for me is where I think it's at.
Is that your talk that you're going to have in Washington? Is it Washington? Okay, cool. Portland. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, is that going to be like recorded? Like, I'm sure someone's recording that.
It is.
Okay.
It is going to be recorded, and it's going to end up being part of my speaker's reel. So yeah.
That will be, I'm sure, be super helpful for a lot of people to hear that for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to work on seeing if I can release snippets of it. So I'm still crafting it. I have to. It's amazing because it's an hour-long keynote, which really a lot of, people will say that that's really too long. But, to capture somebody's attention for an hour, you should really meeting planners need to start scaling that back, but they're just trying to fill time slots. And so to really make that interactive and interesting and captivating is definitely a challenge. So I'm still working on that. That's a long time, but it'll happen.
So I am obsessed with the brain, right? And I think that everybody should be if they want to grow and really know who they are and be the best version of themselves. And I see that you talk a lot about neuroscience. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to know how you got into it, how you had this call to study it, to understand it and bring it to people and better. You said you worked at a school, was that a high school? Were you a counselor there? I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so I started my career as a school psychologist. So I was working with kindergarten all the way up through 21-year-olds, and really was responsible for doing IQ tests, achievement tests, behavioral interventions, working with the students, being an advocate for them, as well as working with the teachers. And then probably my last year, I did train the trainer, where I would go around to school faculties all over one of the counties in Florida, and we would teach the teachers emotional intelligence and how to teach their students, because we knew that if they had emotional and social skills and they learned the power of the pause and learned how to control their emotions, that they did better academically. They formed friendships, there were lower rates of absenteeism, fewer behavior problems, all of that. So that was really where my love for neuroscience sort of started. And then when I left corporate America, I decided to sort of come back and think, you know, what were the things I was passionate about? And the application of neuroscience to business is so, so important, because at the end of the day, it's all human to human. And, you know, I started reading books like Social by Matthew Lieberman and Your Brain at Work by David Rock, and, you know, all of these people who are really, really experts in neuroscience, and really just started applying it to how can I help organizations. And so one of the things that I do is help people learn how to receive feedback well. And that is not a natural thing, because our brains want to perceive feedback as a social threat. And our brains do not decipher between a social threat and a physical threat. So Chantel, if you are giving me feedback in a way that my brain perceives as a threat, I'm actually seeing you like a lion who wants to eat me. And so one of the things that I might do is I might, you know, if we're out in the Sahara or something, you know, and I encounter an animal that wants to eat me, I'm going to go into fight or flight. But if we put it in the corporate context, I'm going to do it, you know, go into like a toward or away response. So if we're in a meeting, I might shut down. You might not hear from me ever again in that meeting. Or my fight response might be to be confrontational with you. And so helping people to understand what those triggers are, and that that's our natural response. We don't want to be dismissing or rejecting feedback. We really want to be training our brains to see it as something that we can learn from and gain insight from and grow. But we have to catch ourselves first if we're going to be able to do that, because that's not how our brain is wired.
That's so cool that you've had a chance to meet with kindergartners to 20-year-olds to now, you know, aspiring professionals all throughout the stage of life. Do you have one like really notable takeaway? And I don't know if you can share it, but about working with in the schools, like one really shocking moment.
Yeah. So there's just one story that stands out. There was a boy that I was working with who was elementary school, and he was a sweet kid, but, you know, we have to be taught. These are skills we have to be taught. So I hear people incorrectly say that you're either born with it or you're not. People skills, right? Social skills, emotional skills. That's just not true. Some of our personalities may make us more predisposed to, you know, being more skilled in certain areas, but you can learn these skills. And so if you don't have good role models, or you don't have people that are teaching you these skills, it can be tricky. And so it was dismissal time, and this boy, super sweet, but he didn't understand. He came up and he hit me on top of the head, and the other person that I was walking with like came and like slammed his notebook on the top of our heads, and then was like running and waving, and we were just like, what just happened? And so, you know, it would have been easy for us to get mad, right? And to want to punish him, because that's so inappropriate to do that to an adult. But at the end of the day, we realized he didn't realize that that was not how you say goodbye to an adult. And so, you know, we sat down with him, like, you know, the next day or whatever, and asked him, instead of, you know, in a punitive way saying that this was wrong, we asked him, you know, what were you trying to do? He's like, oh, I was just trying to say goodbye. We said, you know, that we figured that. And then we taught him the appropriate way to say goodbye, and why you wouldn't want to do that to someone's head. And, you know, it was a huge learning experience for him. Now, had we punished him, what would he have learned from that? And so I think that story always stays in my mind, because we used to use that as an example when we would do the trainer for the school faculties, and there would always be a certain cohort of teachers that would be like, he should have been punished, you know, that was inappropriate, that was physical abuse. And I'm like, he was 9 and he didn't know any better. Now he does. And so now he's been able to practice appropriate ways to say goodbye to adults. And, you know, so that definitely sticks out in my mind, because I think that can transfer over into organizations. If we don't know what is expected of us, sometimes, you know, people just don't have good role models. They just don't. And so I think it's important to be empathetic and try to understand where they're coming from before we react. Sorry about that.
Gotta start over now, man. Just kidding. So Kris, can you kind of draw a line between, you talk about like the neuroscience part of where you kind of started to this vulnerable place that you're at, where you're trying to get people to better understand how it's okay to open up, and it's actually beneficial for them when, like you said, a lot of people just aren't equipped to understand that. How did you kind of make that leap?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all comes back to when we're talking about vulnerability and self-awareness are closely tied together. Because if we don't understand at a very fundamental level those things that we are afraid to confront, how can we improve our self-awareness? You know, how are we going to understand what our triggers are for those things that emotionally hijack us? And so it really is about peeling back the layers. And I'll give you an example just of myself. When I was deciding to leave corporate America, I had, you know, this whisper for a long time of like, you should start your own company. And as many people do, and I talked about this recently in one of my posts, I entertained it many times in the past for like a quick nanosecond, right? Gave it a lot of energy and then stuffed it away. And I talked about, you know, we ghost on ourselves. So we know about ghosting from, you know, dating perspective, where somebody all of a sudden stops communicating, right? But I think we ghost on ourselves when we stop showing up and stop giving attention to the things that are important to us. And we all do it, right? And we make excuses for why that is. And those excuses are those great stories we tell ourselves that make us feel better, why we can't do something. And so when I was leaving corporate America, I told myself that I was only scared because I was afraid to walk away from the golden handcuffs. Because those are, you know, those are important, right? I was making a lot of money. I had great benefits. Those are things that are hard to walk away from. But that really wasn't it. Had I stopped there, that would have been a great story I would have told myself, right? I met with my financial planner and she's like, thumbs up, you got this, you're fine. And I was still terrified. So why was that? I had this epiphany about the fact that it really had nothing to do with the golden handcuffs and everything to do with the fact that I could no longer hide behind a big company name. I had to show myself, which is extremely vulnerable. Like, so what if people didn't like me, didn't like my services, nobody was going to buy from me? What if I failed? All of that. And once I realized that that's what it was liberating. It was like, okay, so I can acknowledge that I am super frightened, but that's a normal reaction, and I can choose to walk through that door of courage and just see, right? Take a risk and just see. And I also thought, if nothing else, I can be a good example for my children to not be afraid, to not self-sabotage your dreams because you're afraid of what people are going to say, or that, you know, like, so what if you fail? So what? That's just a learning opportunity, redefining that. And then also choosing that I would be the one that defines success. No one else gets to define that for me. So there's just a lot of layers. So, you know, where there's fear behind that, if you can work through it, is so much courage. And it just gives you the strength to take on even more risk and challenge yourself even more.
So how do you work through that? Like you said, if you can work through fear, like what's that look like for you?
So for me, sometimes it's like right now, this last week, I've had a little bit of fear going on, and it can be really gripping. You know, I mean, I think about, well, physically, what am I feeling? And I might literally feel like there's a vice grip on my heart, you know, and sometimes want to crawl underneath the covers and just not come out. And so it's okay. Like I literally tell myself, okay, you're fearful right now. There's a little bit of panic going on. That's okay. And really just talk. If you can put words to your emotions, it takes some of the power away from that. And then I always think about, well, what are the things that help you get through it? And for me, it's like reconnecting with your breath, reconnecting with nature, getting on the mat and practicing yoga, spending time with people that I love. And those are things that help me work through those emotions, because at the end of the day, we are emotional creatures. You cannot separate emotion from business. You cannot separate emotion from your life. It is impossible. We are wired to experience emotions. And so don't push them away, because they will only resurface more powerfully. Learn how to process them and use them to your advantage. So that's what I'm trying to do.
That's awesome.
So Kris, I don't think I've ever seen Lacey and Chantel smile as much as I have with any of our other guests. So clearly you're hitting some pretty sweet spots with at least both of them, and Jake and myself too. Katie's just lost in the sauce, but yeah. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So I want to take it back to a couple of things. You started at the beginning saying that it's getting to the outcome isn't all that, it's the journey. And I'm prefacing the question I'm going to ask you. You talk about why settle for acceptable level of mediocrity, embrace vulnerability. And I think I was reading a couple of your articles where you talk about fear and vulnerability. So I want to give you the chance to answer one of these questions. You can answer all of them if you want, but I want you to have the option. The most powerful moment that you shared with us is when your dad passed away a few years ago. I want you to answer it in the context of that. So do you think that it's more important to have loved and lost or not loved at all based on that experience of your dad? What was your final thought before you knew he was going to pass away? And if you could go back to one moment in time, because you talked about regrets at the very beginning of this show, if you could go back to one moment in time and do it again, what exactly is that moment? And I want you to wrap it with, share that with us, and what you wish you had, or what you had to unlearn for one of those moments. So you can pick one of those, or you can pick all of those, but I feel like everything you've shared with us up to this point, one of those is really going to take it really deep for us.
Yeah. So the whole dad thing, obviously still very emotional for me. He was not in my life growing up. And so we didn't get to get to a point where we had a really good relationship and connection until my kids were born. And he was an amazing grandfather. So he didn't even live, for most of my life, he lived out of state. He moved back, and literally he and my stepmom were a very big part of my children's lives up until the point where he passed away. But just a little backstory on what happened to him. So he was very healthy, very active, very athletic, and he was out on his daily 3-mile walk, and he tripped and fell. So take somebody who's athletic, who was, traveling all over the world, living his dream, and he tripped and fell. And he basically, for the most part, face planted. So when he did that, he ended up with a severe brain bleed. Okay, so 6 weeks in the hospital, 2 craniotomies, and he was actually doing pretty well. Shocking, right? I mean, really overcoming the odds. So it was a beautiful day. And I mean, gorgeous blue skies, no clouds. You could feel the warmth of the sun and the breeze on your face. And I was sitting outside, and I decided I was going to skip work that afternoon. I was going to go see him. So I did. I surprised him, and I got there, and he wasn't in his room. I'm he was at a rehab center at this point. Scared me a little bit, but I found out they had taken him for an MRI, and he came back shortly, MRI, all clear. So I got to tell him that afternoon that they were going to release him in 2 days. He couldn't have been more thrilled. I mean, just super excited. We had this amazing afternoon together. It was just so special. He started to get a headache, which was not uncommon for somebody who has a brain bleed. He had a headache every single day. And when I say headache, I'm definitely minimizing that. And he wanted me to leave because he wanted to take a nap. which was weird because he had been napping in front of me for 6 weeks, of me being at the hospital every single day. But that day he wanted me to leave. So I did, and I didn't even get home. I live like about an hour from the hospital. I never even made it home before I got the call that they found him half in, half out of the bed, and they don't know what happened. He had another major bleed. And the neurosurgeon that had given him the all clear earlier that day couldn't believe it. He could not believe this was the same patient. So we had an option where he could have gone in, he could have tried to repair it, but he would have had a 1% chance of ever having a meaningful life again. So we chose not to. And the neurosurgeon, I will never forget, said, "You have done the most loving thing that you could ever do for your father." So when I think about all of the wasted time spent on negative emotions and hurt, and how those 6 weeks, he and I said we loved each other every single day. It just seems so silly to harbor that kind of stuff because it doesn't help you in the end. And it brought my sister and I closer together, my brother and I closer together, and my stepmom and I closer together. And that was truly a gift. And so I've taken that lesson and said to myself that, you know what, every time you want to put your ego in the driver's seat, that's when you need to check yourself and send it to the back. Because when your ego is in the front seat and in charge, you are not winning. You may tell yourself that you are winning, but you are not. There is no winning when it comes to relationships. And when you're keeping score, you're hurting yourself. And so that has probably been the biggest lesson. And so I say I love you, and I say I'm sorry when I need to say that I'm sorry and own up to my mistakes. And that has been something that has been just such a huge difference in my life. And I'm happier for it. Of course I miss him and wish that, and I see that everyone's got tears, so sorry about that. But so that's part of my vulnerability journey and why I'm passionate about that. And, just want people to find what feeds their soul. And that's part of that vulnerability journey, is asking those deep questions. What brings you happiness? What are you passionate about? Stop settling for the acceptable level of mediocrity. Stop letting life happen to you. You have the opportunity to create every single freaking day. Do it. Stop waiting. Life, amazing things aren't just going to happen to you. You have to put yourself out there. You have to love bigger, love boldly, love louder. Put your ego in the back seat. Not too long ago, there was somebody that was having a really tough time, and they were not very kind to me. And God, it would have been so damn easy to just let my ego be in charge. And I challenged myself not to do that and to continue reaching out to this person, because I know that they're hurting and they're not in a good place. And they still don't treat me that well, but that's okay, because at the end of the day, one of my good friends always says, "Is your side of the street clean?" And it is, and I can feel good about that. And so I just try to do that even when I don't want to, because my lizard brain, getting back to the neuroscience, is trying to protect me, but it doesn't know best. And so that's where you have to engage the rational part of the brain to pause and think, what can you do to make the situation better, and owning up to your part of it. So hopefully that answered your question. And I'm sorry that the emotions came out, but again, we're emotional creatures, and it just had to.
Don't be sorry. Don't be sorry, Kris. If I didn't think the world of you before this call, I certainly think much more highly of you now, and I think the rest of the co-hosts just got another glimpse into how great and just honest you really are. So don't ever have to apologize to this group about inciting emotion. So thank you. And from my side.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I hope you're sharing some of that importantly, Kris. That's powerful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm going to open it up to the co-host, because I feel like I'm pretty certain there's something else that might come out from one of the other co-hosts. Give them an opportunity to ask, or even if there's one other thing that they want to just comment on it. And if nobody says anything, then we'll turn it over to you, where you'll get a chance to ask us anything, or even if you just want to have a conversation around it, and take some time to collect yourself as well too. So I really appreciate you answering that and sharing it.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I kind of want to, I want to know a little bit more. You've done some posts around this concept of getting unstuck, and the fact that, you know, obviously, and what you're saying is, you know, when we're in business, we're emotional, like we can't detach, you know, career or feelings of being stuck in a career or being stuck in a, you know, even just anywhere in your life. Is there one thing that you can tell people who feel stuck to help them take that first leap, maybe?
Yeah, I think the inspiration for that, just so you know, was that I see so much sharing on LinkedIn, which is amazing. You know, people talking about their trials and tribulations, but I don't see enough about coping strategies and how to get from where you want to be when you're in a really crappy place. And so that was sort of the inspiration behind it. And I think there's a couple really good things to just start. So I went to a workshop not too long ago where they had us write, so I'll take a piece of paper and 2 columns. And one column is the things that you want to let go, the things that are no longer serving you. And so that is really powerful. And so you make this list. Actually, you can tear this in half when you get to the other part of it, or you can do 2 separate pieces of paper, either way. So those things, those people, those demons, whatever those are for you, that you are going to no longer, you're going to commit, this is not good for you, it's toxic, or maybe it's just not helping you move forward. Whatever that is, you write those down, you ball it up, you burn it. So there's something very symbolic and cathartic about that. And then either the second column, which you've either torn, or second piece of paper, is those things that you want in your life, and really spending the time to self-reflect. And so this is not something that should be rushed. This is really, you have to be able to be comfortable spending time here in your brain by yourself. And this exercise cannot be underestimated as far as the power goes of this. So what are those things that you want? And this can be a dynamic list. And then I would say, for me, I'm very visual. And I also believe in sort of the power of, you know, the law of attraction, and the energy that you're putting out into the universe, I think is just amazing. And I've seen so many examples of that in my life. So that list should be very dynamic. It should be something that you revisit, but it should be very granular. Like, you know, it's fine to have these overarching goals or ideas, but how, from a granular level, what is it that is important to your life on an everyday basis? Because we live every day, or we have the opportunity to do that. And it's up to us to find ways to be grateful for all of these things that are around us that are so impactful. And I mean, you know, I could walk outside and I could find something outside to be grateful for in one moment, but we have to have that mindset to do it. And so it's really about changing your mindset, but being okay being with yourself. Sometimes we're really afraid to be by ourselves because we're afraid of what's going to come out, you know? So that's what I would say is a good start.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think that would help a lot of people. Just having that actionable something that you can take and just to start the process.
Yeah, and then, you know, taking those things that are on your list and creating a vision board, like I said, those images are powerful. And then you can sort of see, like, am I on my way? Am I even, you know, even close? And if not, what can I do to get there? You know, so